The shuttle doors opened to nothing. No glow of landing lights, no reflection from metal walls or distant stars, not even the faint shimmer of atmospheric dust. It was as if the universe itself had been erased. One moment, the cadets were strapped into their seats under the shuttle's interior lamps, listening to the instructor's last briefing. The next, those lamps cut out, and all that remained was pressure on harnesses, the smell of recycled air, and the sound of a dozen different species trying not to panic. Somewhere near the back, a set of chitinous mandibles clicked in distress. A soft, membrane-winged cadet let out a high, warbling sound that might have been a question or a cry. Human ears could not tell the difference. Leon's hands tightened on the harness, knuckles whitening in the vanished light. He had the harness unlocked with a mechanical snap, and he felt himself thrown sideways as gravity suddenly reoriented. The shuttle did not land. It simply opened, dropping its cargo like confetti. Leon's stomach lurched. For a slicing heartbeat, he hung weightless, unable to tell up from down, then impact slammed into his side. He rolled over something that felt like a rock, skidded on something that might have been moss or might have been flesh, and came to a stop against a surface that did not yield. Dust puffed around him, invisible but tangible, scratching against his throat as he coughed. "Is everyone?" A voice broke to his left, speaking galactic common, then dissolved into a choked sound. "I cannot see. My ocelli are offline. I cannot see. I cannot see." It repeated the phrase, each time more shrill. Leon pushed himself up to his hands and knees. His palms found rough, dry earth and scattered pebbles. No immediate pain beyond bruises. Good. His training whispered at him. Assess, orient, act. His instincts wanted to curl into a ball and squeeze his eyes shut, as if that would make any difference. He had grown up in the city. Even at night, even during power outages, there had been some light. The phosphorescent glow of emergency pathways, the green dots of exit signs, the red blink of distant towers. As a kid, he had played at darkness, hiding under blankets with a torch and pretending to be in a cave. This was not that game. Here, his eyes were useless ornaments. "Roll call!" a booming voice shouted somewhere in front of him. It belonged to a Vrogan cadet, Leon remembered, a massive reptilian woman with plated scales and a sense of superiority as solid as her forearms. "Form up! Sound off by squad, or the instructors will fail us before day one." There was a shuffling of bodies. Someone stumbled over Leon's calf and muttered an apology in clipped syllables. Another cadet exhaled in ragged bursts that sounded close to hyperventilating. The Vrogan cursed under her breath, the sharp clicks of her native tongue scraping the air before she switched back to common. "Acclimation protocol," she barked. "Close eyes. Breathe. Our other senses will compensate. We have trained for this." But the training had been theoretical, filtered through safety regulations and redundant systems. Leon could hear the brittle layer of fear under her command tone. The blackout zone was infamous. Here, photonic activity did not behave according to normal physics. Light did not bend, reflect, or even exist. Bioluminescence failed. Energy cells that powered lamps discharged into nothing. Every year, the Academy sent cadets here for what it called a full sensory adaptation trial. Every year, a few dropped out, begging for extraction before the first night ended. "My crest sensors are blind," muttered another voice, thin and breathy. "I have no spatial mapping. I have nothing. This is not adaptation. This is mutilation." Leon swallowed. The taste in his mouth was metallic, tinged with the lingering tang of shuttle fuel. He could not see his own hands, but he flexed his fingers, letting the sensation anchor him. Hands, ground, air moving across his cheeks as others shifted nearby. He began to build a mental map, not with vision, but with contact and sound. "Leon?" A faint whisper came from somewhere behind him. He recognized the voice. Sarah, a slender insectoid cadet from the Crix enclaves. He remembered the delicate shimmer of her wing cases from the shuttle. She had sat next to him, tapping nervous rhythms against her own knees. "I am here," he said, turning his head toward her voice. "Are you hurt?" "No. I do not know." Her words wavered as if she might break apart mid-sentence. "My species sees in 12 spectra. I have never not seen. I cannot process this. It is like being skinned." The comparison jolted him. Leon reached out blindly, sweeping his hand toward the sound. His fingers brushed something smooth and segmented. She flinched, then stilled as he rested his hand lightly on what he hoped was her shoulder. "You are still here," he said. "You are intact. You just lost one input." "My primary input," she whispered. "My world was light." "Now your world is something else," he replied, surprising himself with how steady he sounded. His heart was pounding hard enough to thrum in his ears, like a distant drum. "We adapt. That is the whole point." Around them, the chaos simmered. A cadet from a methane-breathing species coughed harshly, complaining that the air tasted wrong. Somewhere farther off, two voices argued about which direction the shuttle had vanished. The Vrogan barked orders that no one followed. In the absence of sight, the whole group unraveled, everyone retreating into private panic. Leon realized with a cold clarity that if this continued, the first injuries would not come from the environment. They would come from someone stumbling off a ledge or trampling someone smaller in a blind stampede. He thought of the instructor's last words: survive, adapt, cooperate. The trial was not just about enduring darkness. It was about what the cadets would build inside it. He drew in a deep breath and let his voice cut through the overlapping noise, sharp and focused. "Everyone, stop moving," he called. "Freeze for a moment. Listen." Several voices died away. A few mutters continued, but the overall din eased. The sudden relative quiet pressed against his ears. He could hear the wind now, a thin, dry whisper across rock, and the faint rustle of clothing and carapace. "We are spreading out without knowing where the edges are," Leon continued. "Someone will fall. Stay where you are for now. Feel what is under your hands and feet. Dirt? Rock? Plants? Anything moving?" "Who put you in charge, human?" the Vrogan snapped. "You have no rank." "No," he agreed. "But I can hear you just fine, and you can hear me. Right now, that is more use than whoever is still flailing around." Another cadet snorted, a curt puff of amusement. The Vrogan did not answer. Leanne could almost feel her hesitation vibrating in the air, a huge predator considering whether to bite or listen. Finally, she exhaled, a low rumble. "Fine. Stay where you are, all of you. Do as the human says. Anything is better than listening to you spin in circles and scream." Leon stuck his free hand into the ground, letting his fingers dig into the dry soil until he found the edges of a stone and gripped it. The texture scraped his skin, grounding him further. "All right," he said. "We cannot see. That means we rely on touch, hearing, smell, anything else your species has. If you have echolocation, clicks, thermal senses, use them now, but calmly. No more random yelling. Make deliberate sounds. Start by telling me what you feel under you. One by one, speak. We will piece together the terrain from descriptions." It was not much of a plan, but it was better than paralysis. A voice to his right spoke first, low and careful. "This is Harak. I feel flat stone. Slight incline to the north. No vegetation. No movement." Another voice followed, then another. Some mentioned gravel, others patches of coarse grass, one a damp depression that might be a dried stream bed. Leon memorized each detail, placing it in an internal grid. Location estimates were imprecise, but the pattern began to emerge. A rocky basin with uneven ground, ringed by higher ridges. A valley, just as the Academy brief had promised. "You," the Vrogan said grudgingly after a while. "Human. What do you sense?" Leon listened. The wind still brushed past his ears, now carrying the faint smell of minerals, dust, and something organic, maybe lichen or low scrub. Footsteps scuffed on stone when someone shifted. Farther away, he thought he heard the hollow echo of sound bouncing off a wall. "We are in a bowl," he said slowly. "A valley with rock walls not too far in at least one direction. The echo is close. We can test that." He raised his voice. "On my mark, everyone clap once, just once, then stay silent." "This is foolish," someone murmured. "Do it," the Vrogan commanded, and the complaint died. 3, 2, 1, Leon said, then brought his hands together. The crack of his clap exploded around him, followed instantly by a staggered series of others. For a second, the air was full of sound. The echoes came back in waves, near and sharp from one side, softer from another, almost absent in one direction. It painted the valley in his mind, not with light, but with depth. "The rock wall is closest over there," he said, pointing in the direction of the strongest echo even though he knew no one could see. "We have more space on the opposite side, probably a gentle slope. We should avoid moving toward the steep echo until we know where the drop-offs are." Apart from the nervous shifting, the group had grown quieter, the structured exercise pulling them out of individual terror. Leon felt Sarah's shoulder steady under his hand. Her breathing had slowed. "This zone cannot be pure cruelty," he thought silently. "The Academy always leaves some kind of opportunity, something we can find that is more than just survival." The thought was like a tiny spark in his mind, a memory of nights back home when the power had failed. In those moments, his family had lit candles that glowed dimly for a while before emergency coatings faded. When the glow vanished entirely, his father had made a show of it. "Now," his father would say in mock solemnity, "we are in the realm of shadows, and shadows need stories." They had played games in the darkness, guessing who spoke, recognizing people by footsteps, making percussion bands out of kitchen utensils. Without screens, voices had grown larger, laughter louder, the shape of the room different. The absence of light had not been empty then. It had been full of something else, something shared. That same feeling tugged at Leon now, faint but insistent. The instructors had dropped the cadets into a nightmare, but hidden inside the nightmare was a test of what they could create when sight was stripped away. Some of these species would crumble. Some would cling to old hierarchies and habits that no longer worked. Or, if he could manage it, they would build something new, something that did not require light. He did not have the outline of that something yet, only the sense of possibility. The word festival had not formed clearly in his thoughts, but a seed had already been planted. For now, he pushed that seed aside and focused on the basics. "All right," he said, feeling a strange calm settle over him. "We know we are in a valley. We know the steep side. We know we are not immediately in a riverbed or on a cliff edge. That means we can form a safe center. Everyone, slowly, on hands and feet if you must, move toward my voice. If you move and hit someone, stop and stay there. We will compress the group and then decide our next move." "And if predators are already here, human?" someone asked, voice shaking. "If something hunts in this dark?" Leon thought of teeth and claws he could not see, creeping across the stones. The Academy loved its surprises, but he also remembered the clause in the trial briefing. No lethal hazards within the first 6 hours. The instructors wanted fear, not massacre. "If something hunts here, it will hear us eventually whether we stand alone or together," he said. "I would rather meet it as a group than scatter as prey." There was a pause, then a few murmurs of reluctant agreement. Bodies began to move, cautious and slow. Knees scraped, claws clicked, tails brushed against ankles. Leon kept talking, letting his voice be a fixed point in the void. He spoke about training exercises, about how some species used sonar, about how others relied on scent trails. He told them to describe any unusual sensations so the others could learn vicariously. It felt clumsy and improvised, but gradually the sounds of panic faded into the sounds of organized effort. As the first cadets reached him, their shapes invisible but solid, Leon felt the shape of the group change. Instead of scattered points across the valley floor, they became a cluster, a core. In the perfect dark of the blackout zone, the first fragile threads of cohesion were forming, spun not from light or symbols, but from voices and touch. Leon did not know yet that in a few days those threads would become songs, rhythms, and rituals that turned terror into celebration. For the moment, he only knew that the Academy had taken away the stars, and he would have to find a way to make something shine without them. Leon felt the cluster of cadets settle into a tense, uneasy quiet around him, but the darkness still pressed against his skin like a living thing. No one had adjusted yet. No one had found confidence or rhythm. Every breath seemed fragile, every small movement a risk. But he could sense it. The group had stopped unraveling. The first task was accomplished. The second task, the far harder one, waited like a closed door in front of him. He had brought the cadets together, but their cohesion was brittle. Fear sat in every inhalation. Silence wrapped around them, thick and expectant, and the shape of that silence was not comforting. It was an emptiness begging to be filled. A scraping noise came from the left, followed by a stifled gasp. A small cadet stumbled on uneven ground and collided with the shoulder of a larger one, who growled in irritation. Leon heard the tension rising again like sparks in tinder. He knew he had to keep the group anchored in anything except panic. Panic was contagious, but so was calm, if someone could create it. He inhaled slowly and listened to the dark. The world was a black canvas. Nothing moved unless he imagined it. His heart no longer hammered as violently as before, and his nerves settled into something familiar. The state he entered before a difficult exam or dangerous training scenario. Focus, intuition, a sense of possibility that arced like a quiet current through his thoughts. He needed to replace the silence with something deliberate, something rhythmic and controlled, something that drew attention to itself instead of the darkness. But the idea had not formed yet, only hovered like a spark, waiting for friction. "Everyone stay low for now," he said. "Keep your hands out in front of you. No one rush. No one stand up fully until we know the ground is consistent. Sarah, is this you on my right?" "Yes," she whispered. Her chitinous plates clicked softly with each breath. She was still trembling, but no longer talking like someone at the edge of collapse. "I am here." "Good," Leon said softly. "Focus on the ground. Describe what your feelers sense." Her hands brushed the soil, the sound faint but distinct. She spoke with more steadiness this time. "The dirt is packed more tightly here. I feel depressions, footprints, but old ones, weathered edges." "Anyone else feel anything unusual near them?" Leon asked the group. A rumbling voice answered from a short distance. "This is the Vrogan. My left side touches a ridge of stone. It curves, feels shaped, not natural." Leon's mind pieced the discovery together. "Shaped stone," he murmured. "That means structures, maybe ruins, maybe old training markers." "It could be unstable," the Vrogan warned. "Yes," Leon agreed, "which is why we test it carefully." He placed both hands on the ground and crawled toward the voice. The movement was slow, each shift of weight calculated. He bumped lightly into a thick-scaled arm and followed her guidance to the ridge. When his fingers touched the stone, he felt grooves, smooth, intentional cuts, the kind that came from tools, not erosion. The surface was cold and steady beneath his palms, solid, anchoring. "This could be useful," Leon said. "If the wall is stable, it gives us orientation and shelter from at least one side of the valley." "We are not staying here long," the Vrogan grumbled. "The extraction site is somewhere deeper inside the zone. We have to move eventually." "Yes," Leon said, "but not while we are disorganized. First we learn the terrain, then we move." The Vrogan huffed, but did not argue. Leon traced another groove in the stone. There were symbols carved into it. Triangular arcs, shallow spirals, repeating indentations. He could not see them, but he mapped them by touch. Whoever had carved them had done so with precision. It did not feel like academy work. It felt older. His fingertips pressed deeper into one of the spirals, and a faint vibration traveled through the stone. A low, resonant hum that traveled through his wrist and up his arm. He froze. Then he pressed again. The hum came again, distinct and deliberate. The Vrogan stiffened beside him. What was that? An echo or resonance, Leon said, but not natural. The grooves amplify vibration. Meaning what? Sarah asked in a tiny voice behind him. Meaning, Leon said slowly, we can use it. He pushed himself back from the wall and sat cross-legged. The hum had given him an idea that sharpened quickly, like a blade being honed inside his mind. If vision was gone, then structure needed to come from something else, something everyone could share, something the dark could not swallow. The cadets needed orientation, cohesion, confidence. Words alone were not enough. He needed sound, predictable sound, patterned sound, rhythm. He pulled 2 small stones from the ground and tapped them together. A crisp, clean click echoed into the void. Several cadets gasped. Someone whispered, "How did you do that?" "By tapping," Leon said. "Nothing more." He tapped again. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Soft, then loud. The echoes answered from the carved wall, warm and resonant. He felt the air shift. The group listened, their fear momentarily reshaped into attention. "Everyone," Leon said, "I want each of you to take a stone. Feel around for one. Hold it in your hands." There was rustling as hands searched the soil. A few cadets complained about the difficulty, but eventually each one held something. "Now listen. I will tap a pattern. You repeat it. Only once. Then silence." He lifted his stones and tapped. 1, pause, 1, 1. A few cadets tapped back. Some were too delayed, others too quick. A few taps came from the wrong direction entirely. But the attempt was there. "Again," Leon said, smiling faintly into the darkness. "Feel the rhythm, not the silence." He tapped a new pattern, then another. Slowly, more cadets fell into sync. The initial chaos transformed into something like stuttering unity. Some were offbeat, some were clumsy, but they were listening, really listening. The darkness no longer felt like a devouring presence. It became a space shaped by sound. When most had repeated the pattern correctly, Leon placed the stones on the ground. "Good. You hear more clearly when you are focused. We will need that. Sound can help us navigate, measure distance, understand shape, even sense motion." "You are making noise in a place that punishes the unprepared," the Vrogan said with wary skepticism. "Yes," Leon answered, "but the zone is vast, and we are many. Controlled sound is safer than random shouting or blind wandering. It gives us structure. And if something hears us, then we will hear it first." That earned a low grunt of reluctant approval. Motivation replaced paralysis. Leon felt the cadets leaning, figuratively, toward him. He did not want to be a leader, not officially. He did not have the authority, but he could feel himself slipping into the role because someone had to. If not him, then who? Someone needed to turn this group into more than frightened bodies clinging to one another. "Now," Leon said, "we find resources. No fire, no light. But there may be water, plants, structures. We move as a unit and stay connected. If you have a tail or limb long enough, touch the person behind you. If not, touch their shoulder. We move slow. The Vrogan leads on the right. I will stay in the center. Sarah, move to my left." A wave of movement responded to his instructions. He felt hands brush his sides and settle lightly. A nervous tremor ran through the group, but not the same kind of tremor as before. This one came with direction. As the cadets formed a line, Leon tapped his stones again, but softly now, simple, steady beats like the pulse of a living creature. 1, 2, 1, 2. The cadets repeated the rhythm with their steps, some whispering it to themselves as they crawled forward on hands and knees. Leon discovered quickly that the ground changed texture every few meters. Patches of crumbly earth alternated with flatter slabs of stone. At one point, he felt a sharp dip and warned the group before anyone slid. Sarah used her sensitive limbs to analyze the airflow and alert others to open space ahead. A cadet with thermal perception called out where the air was slightly warmer, suggesting vegetation or small animals. Every species had something to contribute. Leon guided the information into coherent movement. Time slipped. Minutes or hours, he could not tell in the eternal dark. But eventually the stone wall curved inward, creating a shallow alcove. The air inside it smelled faintly of moisture. "Stop," Leon said softly. "This is good cover, and I think there is water nearby." A murmur of exhausted relief flowed through the group. The Vrogan tested the stone overhead and grunted. "Solid. No loose pieces. Safe enough." Leon crawled farther into the alcove until he felt cool dampness under his palm. He pressed harder and felt soft mud. His heart lifted. "There is water seepage here," he announced. "Possibly a spring underneath." "We cannot drink mud," someone muttered miserably. "No, but we can dig, and if we dig correctly, water rises." "You sound certain," Sarah whispered. "I learned it on a field trip when I was a kid," Leon said with a faint laugh. "It works." He guided the cadets into digging a shallow basin. Hands, claws, and appendages worked together, scraping and scooping. The rhythm of the earlier tapping returned, this time in the form of coordinated labor. The sound became grounding, almost meditative. Eventually, water pooled slowly into the hole. Clean, cool, drinkable. The first cadet to lower his face into it made a startled sound of relief. Leon waited until everyone had drunk before he allowed himself a sip. The water was crisp, mineral-rich, and grounding. His dry throat loosened. His mind sharpened further. The darkness no longer seemed so oppressive. He sat back, breathing evenly. The cadets were calmer, more stable. But the challenge was far from over. He felt the hum of the carved wall through his fingertips again and realized the idea that had sparked earlier now had shape. If the stone could amplify vibrations, then so could other materials. Rhythm could be more than orientation. It could be the foundation of something larger, something uplifting, something communal, something joyful. The blackout zone could take their sight, but it could not take their imagination. He felt the corners of his mouth rise in a grin no one could see. The beginnings of something extraordinary had taken root, and soon the cadets would feel it, even if none of them knew yet what was coming. Leanne remained seated near the shallow pool as the sound of sipping faded and the cadets settled into a wary, exhausted stillness. The alcove offered shelter, but shelter alone would not hold the group together. He listened carefully to the breathing around him, the tiny rustles as individuals adjusted their positions, the faint tapping of Sarah's claw tips against the ground as she tested her surroundings. The darkness had lost some of its suffocating weight, yet it still hung over the group like a silent beast waiting for the chance to pounce on any fragile moment of peace. If he allowed the quiet to stretch too long, unease would return. He pressed his palm against the grooved stone wall, feeling the etched spiral again. Its resonant hum still lingered faintly in his memory. A carved surface that carried sound. A group of cadets desperate for structure. And a night with no light to guide anyone. The idea that had first sparked during the earlier tapping exercise grew more vivid. If sound was the only reliable medium, then sound needed to become more than communication. It needed to become an anchor, a shared activity, something complex enough to occupy minds and simple enough for everyone to follow. He lifted one of the stones he had used earlier and struck it gently against the wall. The tone vibrated outward, deeper and richer than before. A soft murmur rose from the group. Some were startled. Others leaned toward the sound instinctively. The wave of attention washed over the alcove, pulling everyone's focus toward something outside themselves. Sarah, seated close enough for him to feel the brush of her wing case, tilted her head. "You made that on purpose," she whispered. "Yes," Leon answered quietly. "Sound behaves differently here. It lasts longer, spreads farther. It can make this place feel less empty." The Vrogan snorted from several meters away. "Sound will not protect us from predators, or from the instructor's punishments." "No," Leon said, "but it will protect us from fear, and that might matter just as much." He struck another rhythm, this time a soft roll of taps that climbed in pace before slowing again. The wall carried each vibration as if amplifying his intentions. The darkness shifted subtly, not physically, but in how the group responded to it. Instead of leaning inward and shrinking from the environment, the cadets now leaned outward, listening. "You are playing something," Sarah said, her voice tinged with something fragile and new, curiosity. "It is nothing yet," Leon said, "just sound. But sound can become something if we push it far enough." A small voice to his right, high and trembling with lingering anxiety, asked, "What does that mean?" Leon tapped his stone once more before answering. "We cannot see. We cannot create fire or light. But what we can create is rhythm, patterns, games, a way to interact with the space instead of hiding from it." The Vrogan grumbled. "Games? This is survival training." "Yes," Leon said, "and surviving fear is part of surviving the trial." Silence followed, but not the earlier kind. This silence was filled with thought. He shifted onto his knees and tapped his stones together again, louder now, creating a steady beat that echoed into the alcove. He tapped until the sound seemed to pulse against the bodies gathered around him. "Listen," he said. "We build something together, something that belongs to all of us, something that exists only in the dark." Sarah touched the stone wall with her fingers. "You want to make an activity?" "Yes," he replied. "More than that, I want to make an event." The word event held strange weight in the void. He breathed it out softly, then continued. "Each species here has unique senses. Some feel vibrations better than others. Some hear certain frequencies. Some have excellent spatial memory. If we mix those abilities, we can make something none of us could do alone." A cadet with a nasal, melodic voice asked, "What kind of something?" Leon smiled, though no one could see it. "A festival," he said. The word felt bold and reckless, like tossing a stone into bottomless water. A festival made of sound. Confusion swept the group in uneasy murmurs. A festival sounded frivolous to them, almost absurd. But absurdity had power, especially in darkness. It broke the mental patterns that fear fed on. "A festival requires music," the melodic-voiced cadet said uncertainly, "and dancing, and stories, and games." "Yes," Leon said, "and we can do all of that, right here, right now." The Vrogan's skeptical voice rumbled from the right. "You think a festival will help us pass this trial?" Leon considered his reply carefully. "I think we need something that makes this place feel like ours," he said. "Not a prison, not a trap. Something we create with our own hands. Something that makes us feel stronger instead of smaller." A long silence followed. Someone shuffled closer to him. Someone else exhaled shakily. Leon felt the shift, small but real. He tapped a new rhythm, slow, then quick, then slow again. The cadets listened. Then someone repeated it. Then another. Within a few seconds, the alcove filled with a small, uneven echo of his pattern. This was the moment he was waiting for. "Good," he said. "Now we build layers." He broke the rhythm into two parts and taught one part to the left side of the group and the other to the right. He did it slowly, repeating each sequence until the cadets could perform it without hesitation. When the two halves joined together, the overlapping patterns created something that resembled primitive percussion. The darkness pulsed with it. The steady, unifying rhythm replaced the earlier dread. Sarah's voice quivered with fascination. "It feels like the darkness is moving." "Yes," Leon said quietly, "because we are giving it shape." He guided the group to add stomps, finger taps, and body percussion. The Vrogan's thick tail slapped the ground at intervals, producing a heavy beat. The methane breather hummed deep, resonant tones that added a drone under the rhythm. A delicate avian cadet produced soft wing flutters that filled the higher range. The alcove transformed from a silent void into a living chamber where each sound contributed to a greater whole. Leon felt heat in his chest. Not physical heat, something emotional, rare, and intoxicating. He had taken a group of terrified cadets and, in the span of an hour, turned them into collaborators. "Keep going," he said. Breathless with excitement, he tried to hide. "Feel the sound. Feel each other through it. No one is alone when we do this." Sarah's wing cases trembled with a light, tremolo-like vibration. "It feels almost joyful." "It is supposed to," he answered. The Vrogan gave a deep, grudging laugh. "Human, you are strange, but this is not unpleasant." Leon allowed himself a brief moment of pride before redirecting the group. "Now we rotate positions," he said. "Slowly. Follow the sound you hear most clearly. Move toward it. Let your feet find safe ground, but trust your hearing more than your memory." The cadets shifted in the dark, keeping the rhythm alive while their positions changed. Moving without sight but with purpose created a new sensation, motion guided by sound instead of vision. It was disorienting at first, but exhilarating for those who dared to embrace it. For the first time since being dropped into the blackout zone, the cadets were not merely surviving. They were participating, creating, building. When the rhythm slowed and finally faded, the breath that filled the alcove was no longer trembling or panicked. It was warm, steady, shared. Leon lifted one of his stones and tapped lightly on the resonant spiral of the wall. "This," he said quietly, "was only the beginning. Tomorrow night we build something bigger, something grander." "What will it be?" someone asked eagerly. "We will decide together," Leon said. "But first we rest. The night here never ends, but our energy does." The cadets settled against one another, listening to the quiet that now felt alive instead of empty. The alcove held warmth that had nothing to do with light or heat. It was the warmth of unity forged in darkness. Leon leaned back against the grooved stone and closed his eyes. Not that it made any difference. The rhythm still lingered in his mind, like a heartbeat echoed through memory. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time since falling into the darkness, he was not afraid. He was building something, something the instructors never expected, something the blackout zone could not take away. A festival had begun to stir in the void, and soon the entire valley would feel its pulse. Leon drifted awake to a world that had not changed even slightly. The darkness greeted him with the same absolute weight, the same formless expanse. But something inside the alcove had changed profoundly. The cadets who had huddled together in fear now breathed with the slow rhythm of people who had found a fragile kind of safety. The memory of last night's rhythm still pulsed faintly in the air, as if the stone walls held on to the vibrations. He stretched his legs, joints popping quietly, and listened. Someone murmured in a half-dream state. Someone else shifted and brushed an arm against stone. Sarah stirred at his left, her wing cases giving a soft, sleepy flutter. The festival seed was alive. Now it needed to grow. He took a deep breath and tapped 2 fingers against his knee, testing the atmosphere. The sound felt clearer than yesterday, as if the cadets' shared effort had carved out a pocket of familiarity inside this deadened world. The cadence awakened a few nearby cadets, who lifted their heads, or whatever sensory organs they used, with groggy curiosity. Sarah turned slightly toward the tapping. "You are awake early," she whispered. Or maybe it is not early. I cannot tell time here. None of us can, Leon said. So we make our own time. She made a soft, trembling sound, something between amusement and faint disbelief. With rhythm. With rhythm, he agreed. He rose carefully, brushing pebbles from under his palm as he climbed to his knees. The Vrogan's heavy breathing echoed from deeper inside the alcove. She was a light sleeper despite her size, and the faintest shift in the air told him she was already awake. "What are you planning now, human?" she rumbled. Leon smiled. Her skepticism had softened, but her voice still carried its usual intimidating resonance. "I want to test senses," he said. "We need to know what each cadet can do in this environment before we begin the next stage." "And what is the next stage?" she pressed. "You will see," he said. "Or rather, you will feel." She snorted in reluctant amusement. Leon raised his voice enough to wake the rest of the group. "Everyone," he called gently. "If you are awake, join me near the center of the alcove. If you are not awake, wake up." Groans, rustles, and quiet curses rolled through the chamber. The cadets moved slowly but without the frantic carelessness of the first night. Some reached out to touch others to orient themselves. Some clicked or hummed quietly to map their immediate surroundings. Even this small behavioral shift made Leon's chest swell with pride. He waited until the cluster formed, then knelt so his voice carried evenly among them. "Today we experiment," he said. "I want each of you to explore your senses at full range: sound, touch, smell, vibration, whatever you rely on. We test them one by one." "And how is this different from standard sensory drills?" someone asked from behind him. "Because standard drills happen in light," Leon said, "and here we have none. You are not adapting your senses. You are rediscovering them without visual interference." That drew quiet murmurs of agreement. He heard the shift in posture. The cadets were leaning in, waiting. "First," Leon continued, "I want each of you to make a sound that is natural for your species. Something you normally use to communicate or perceive the world, but do it one at a time." The Vrogan volunteered first. She released a guttural vibration from deep in her chest, low enough that it hummed through the ground. The stone picked it up immediately, carrying it outward. Leon placed his hand on the floor and nodded. "Very good. That will help us detect large cavities or hollow structures." Next came a cadet with delicate membranes who emitted a fluttering chirp that danced through the higher registers. It skipped off the uneven walls, giving Leon a faint impression of the alcove's irregular interior. "Perfect," he said. "Sharp and light. Useful for mapping movement." Sarah stepped forward with hesitant courage. When she clicked her mandibles, the sound came sharp, crisp, and surprisingly multidirectional. It bounced with a metallic tone that mapped the alcove even more cleanly. "That is excellent," Leon said warmly. "Your species' echolocation is one of the best tools we have." Her wing cases trembled with shy pride. One by one, each cadet produced the natural sound of his or her species. Leon listened with meticulous focus. Some vibrated the air, some vibrated the ground, some created breathy sounds that carried scent traces. A few created frequencies that Leon could not hear but could sense faintly as pressure on his eardrums. When the last cadet finished, he spoke again. "Now we test how well we can interpret each other's senses. I want everyone to close any sensory organs you are not using, fold them, dampen them, however you do it, and focus entirely on listening." "Listening with ears," a cadet muttered bitterly, "is not something my species does well." "Then listen with your bones," Leon replied, "or with your skin, or with your throat. Whatever works. The darkness will not adapt to us. We adapt to it." He moved closer to the carved wall and tapped lightly on its grooves. The hum rose, deeper this time, resonating through the alcove like a distant drum. Leon stepped aside so others could place their hands on the stone. "Feel this," he said. "Let the vibrations guide you. Where the hum strengthens, the stone is thinner. Where it weakens, it is thick. If we can map depth like this, we can find hidden openings, cracks, maybe even other shelters. The Vrogan grunted in surprise. The resonance. I can feel a hollow behind this section. Exactly, Leon said. And that hollow might lead somewhere. The cadets spread their hands across the wall, tapping gently, listening for shifts, learning its structure. In the darkness, the exercise became intimate and strangely beautiful. The sound of tapping grew rhythmic again, not planned, but emerging naturally from collective exploration. When the group finished mapping the wall, Leon moved them outward, farther from the alcove. He wanted them to stretch their spatial abilities, to understand the valley through sound instead of stumbling through it. Stand in a loose circle, he said. I will walk through the center. Use your senses to track me. Listen for my steps, the direction, the speed, the cadence. When you think you know where I am, point to that spot. He stepped into the open space, moving carefully but deliberately. His footfalls were soft, but deliberate enough to echo faintly off the stone walls. He shifted direction abruptly. He paused. He scraped his foot lightly to create a dragging noise. He breathed more loudly at unexpected moments. The cadets responded with increasing accuracy, pointing at him even when he attempted to confuse them. Some were more skilled than others, but each attempt sharpened their perception. He tried a faster pace next, forcing them to rely not just on the sound, but on the rhythm of motion itself. Some cadets followed with surprising precision. Others complained, but Leon could hear their progress in the reduced stumbling and improved coordination. When he finally stopped, the group seemed more confident, more grounded. He knelt again and spoke with gentle firmness. Good. You are learning. Now we add another layer. The Vrogan let out a low sigh. Another one? Yes, Leon said with a grin that only Sarah could sense from his proximity. We are going to teach each other songs. That caused a stir of confusion, amusement, and discomfort. Songs? One cadet protested. Half of us cannot sing. You do not need to sing, Leon said. A song is just patterned sound, a sequence of tones or beats. Even tapping can become a song. He lifted his stones and produced a simple melody-like pattern, tapping each stone against the other in alternating speeds and strengths. Then he repeated it until the cadets recognized its structure. This is a human beat song, he said. Now who wants to teach one from his or her species? For the first time since arriving in the Blackout zone, the group hesitated not from fear, but from embarrassment. It was a strangely encouraging development. The membrane-winged cadet stepped forward at last. My species uses wind songs, she said softly. Not for entertainment, but for navigation. Then show us, Leon encouraged her. She inhaled deeply and released a trembling, whistling note that shifted in pitch based on how she shaped her mouth and throat. The note danced through the alcove, moving like a living thing, brushing past Leon's cheek like a warm breeze. When she stopped, the echoes lingered beautifully. That was incredible, he said sincerely. Teach us. She instructed the others in how to mimic it. Most failed. A few managed approximate versions, but the effort filled the alcove with a soft, rippling harmony. Next came Sarah, who taught her people's click cascade, a rapid sequence of sharp clicks used in complex communication. The sound was crisp, intricate, and mesmerizing. Then the Vrogan stepped forward reluctantly. My people do not sing, she said. We roar. Roar, then, Leon said. She released a controlled, rumbling roar, deep, proud, and resonant. The cadets instinctively backed away, but the sound shaped the entire valley more clearly than any other. Teach us, Leon urged. She hesitated before doing so, showing the cadets how to create chest resonance instead of air-driven noise. It was awkward for most, but some managed to produce faint vibrations that approximated her roar. By the time the exercise ended, the alcove was filled with a chorus of mismatched but heartfelt sounds from a dozen species. The darkness no longer felt empty at all. It throbbed with life, shared life. Leanne sat down again, overwhelmed, breathless, exhilarated. "Good," he said. "Tonight we build the first true festival." Sarah leaned closer. "What will it be called?" He thought for a moment, feeling the dark vibrate with the combined heartbeat of the group. "The Festival of Echoes," he said softly. And in the silence that followed, he sensed every cadet breathe the same breath of anticipation. By the time Leon felt the group settle from the last round of sense drills, the valley no longer seemed like hostile terrain. It felt like a hall with the lights turned off, waiting for someone to announce the beginning of an event. The name he had given the idea, Festival of Echoes, had passed from mouth to mouth in the dark. Every time a cadet whispered it, the word picked up weight until it no longer sounded like a joke. It sounded like a promise. He did not sleep again. Rest came in shallow stretches, broken by planning. While others drifted, he traced grooves on the stone, tested small patterns, walked short arcs across the valley floor to memorize distances between the alcove, the pool, and the nearest outcroppings. Each step, each tap of his fingers, became part of a mental map that did not need light. When he felt the group stir in something that might have been a new cycle, he straightened and called softly, "Wake up. Festival time." The words earned groans, laughter, and a faint roar of approval from the Vrogan. The mix of reactions made him grin. No one sounded hollow anymore. Sarah pushed herself upright beside him, her wing cases brushing over the ground. "Is this really happening?" she asked, half incredulous, half eager. "Yes," Leon said. "No one else here will make something like this for us, so we make it ourselves." He moved to the open space at the center of the valley, guided by the familiar slope under his feet and the memory of earlier echoes. The cadets followed, gripping shoulders and tails, clicking, humming, or sniffing the air to keep proximity. In the dark, they formed a ring around him, some taller than he was, some so small he could have lifted them with one arm. To visioned species, the formation would have looked chaotic. Here, it felt precise. "All right," Leon said, projecting his voice so it carried cleanly. "Every festival needs a beginning, a signal. We choose one now." The membrane-winged cadet cleared her throat softly. "My people start air ceremonies with a single-held note," she said. "It lasts as long as the breath." "Can you lead it?" Leon asked. "Yes," she answered, more firmly than before. He stepped back so the focus shifted away from him. The Festival of Echoes could not be one human performing for everyone. It had to belong to all of them, or it would die as soon as this trial ended. "On your sound," he said to her. She inhaled slowly and released a clear, trembling tone that floated just above hearing, sharp and pure. The note brushed over Leon's skin like cool wind and spread outward across the valley, touching stone, bodies, and carved walls alike. Every cadence drill from earlier, every mapping exercise, turned that vibration into a known language. The valley was not empty. It resonated. When her breath finally ended and the note faded into silence, Leon spoke. "Festival of Echoes. First call." The words hung in the dark like a banner. From somewhere near the rear of the ring, the methane breather released a deep, continuous hum that sat beneath the memory of the high note like a foundation stone. The Vrogan added a slow, spaced-out tail slap on the rock, a heavy heartbeat that measured time. Leon realized he did not need to direct every step. He had set the frame. The cadets were filling it. He waited until the slow pattern stabilized, then lifted his stones and added a mid-range rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause. Sarah began a cascade of clicks that wove between the beats, intricate and playful. Another cadet joined with claws brushing in soft swishes over the ground, creating a whispering counterpoint. The sound thickened, layered, interlocking but not collapsing into mess. Leon felt the change inside the group like a tide. Movements loosened, shoulders uncurled. A cadet with avian ancestry began to stamp in a careful pattern, then lifted both feet and hopped, letting her weight fall in time with the tail slap and hum. It was clumsy and slow, but it was dance. Others copied her in ways their bodies allowed. A series of short shuffles, a swaying of upper segments, a rippling flex of spine. There was no need for anyone to see the shapes. The sound of feet and claws hitting stone in rhythm was enough. No one was watching anyone else. No one needed to worry about looking foolish. The dark equalized humiliation into impossibility. That realization moved through the group faster than any spoken reassurance could have. Leon stepped sideways, allowing himself small, grounded steps that matched the beat he played. In the shuttles and training halls of the academy, he had never been a dancer. Embarrassment had always pressed in from too many directions. Here, his body belonged entirely to him. No eyes tracked him. Only sound did. The festival grew. Voices rose, not in words at first, but in species, sounds repurposed as music. Chirps stretched into trills. Roars narrowed into controlled pulses. Buzzes and rattles found places between the primary beats. It was not graceful or polished, but it was unmistakably celebration. "Story circle!" Leon shouted over the collective rhythm. "We make stories next. One sentence at a time. No vision, only sound and memory." The beats softened as the cadets listened. The hum and tail slap remained as a constant pulse beneath the quieter layer. "I will start," Leon said. "Then the one to my left adds something, then the next, and so on. No one plans ahead. You speak what you feel in the moment." He lifted his chin, eyes reflexively focusing on nothing. "Once, in a valley that had no stars," he said slowly, "a group of cadets arrived who refused to be quiet." Sarah followed, voice trembling but strong. "The valley tried to swallow their fear," she added, "but the fear learned to talk and turned into a song." The Vrogan came next, her tone rough. "The song woke the old stone beneath them," she said, "and the stone discovered it liked to sing back." One by one, the ring of cadets extended the tale, weaving in jokes, exaggerations, and small echoes of real events. No one narrated disasters or deaths. The story bent toward triumph the way a plant bends toward light. In a place without light, sound became the thing minds reached for. As the story grew stranger and more elaborate, laughter broke out. A sound that had been rare here, but now came easily. The laughter itself became part of the festival, a wild percussion that needed no training. By the time the circle had gone around twice, the valley contained a myth about sentient darkness that gave tests only to those who bored it, and carved stones that demanded new rhythms in exchange for safe passage. The cadets had placed themselves at the center of it without even realizing what that meant. In their shared fiction, they were not victims. They were protagonists. Leon let the story trail off into crosstalk and improvisation. He stepped back and simply listened. The festival no longer needed his constant guidance. It had learned to self-sustain, like a fire that had finally caught and did not die when a single hand stopped feeding it fuel. Far above the valley, unseen and unheard by the cadets, the instructors watched the sensor feeds. Most of the time, the blackout zone delivered predictable data: scattered heartbeats, frantic movement, erratic respiration, shouted arguments that the dampened environment half devoured before the microphones reached them. This time, the consoles showed something else entirely. One of the senior instructors frowned at the synchronized waveforms. "Are those patterned?" she asked. Her colleague leaned closer. "Look at the timing markers. That is not random noise. That is coordinated." The audio filtered through the room's speakers as an adjusted composite. Hum, roar, tap, click, stamp, all layered into a complex, shifting pattern. The instructors had monitored festivals on a dozen worlds, complete with professional ensembles and choreographed motion. What came from the blackout zone was raw and uneven, but it carried the genetic code of a true communal ritual. The senior instructor checked the biometric overlay. "Stress levels are dropping," she said slowly. "Not just baseline adaptation. They are below standard now. Some of those cadets are in near meditative states while fully engaged." Her colleague shook his head with a quiet, grudging respect. "One of them did this. The human, probably." The group behavior pivoted sharply after his physiological response changed from alert panic to focused excitement. "The human? Of course." She exhaled through her nose and folded her arms. "Record everything. We may extract protocol elements later." In the valley, the cadets reached the festival's peak. The rhythm intensified, then collapsed into softer patterns. The membrane-winged cadet led a guided night walk, sending small groups in carefully spaced circles while she held a steady note to mark the central point. Sarah taught a game where cadets had to identify each other purely by sound, footstep patterns, breathing, unique clicks or growls. The Vrogan organized a march of strength, where those with heavier bodies took turns striking the rock wall at different points, helping everyone map weak spots and solid anchors. Leon, for once, did not stand at the center of every activity. He moved through them, offered suggestions, and then stepped back. The festival had turned the valley into a classroom with no walls. Skills that had been drilled separately before, spatial mapping, sensory focus, emotional regulation, now meshed organically under the banner of celebration. When the extraction signal finally came on the last scheduled cycle, it arrived as a vibration through the cadets' implants and a low chime in the air. No floodlights descended. No emergency flares cut the dark. The blackout zone remained stubbornly blind. "Cadets!" A familiar voice rang in Leon's head, calm and official. "Trial duration complete. Prepare for retrieval. Remain in your current area." For a moment, no one moved. Then the Vrogan gave a snort. "Of course the instructors interrupt during the best part." Sarah laughed. "We can always make another one. Somewhere else." Leon swallowed a tightness in his throat he had not expected. He had known this was a trial. He had known it would end. But the idea of leaving the valley felt wrong, as if he were abandoning something precious. The Festival of Echoes existed only here, in this impossible darkness, and these specific stone walls. He touched the carved spiral one last time and struck it gently with his knuckles. The hum that rose felt like a farewell. "Festival closing," he said softly, so only the ones nearest could hear. "For now." The retrieval platforms manifested like invisible floors sliding under their feet. A moment later, a new kind of sensation lanced through every retina. Light. Dazzling, clinical, merciless light. Even with eyelids squeezed shut, Leon winced. His body had already begun to recalibrate back to visual dominance. He hated it a little. When he dared to open his eyes, the world had edges again, clean lines, panels, uniforms. The blackout zone was gone, replaced by a debriefing chamber with seats arranged in terraces. Instructors stood at the front, faces composed into carefully neutral expressions. The cadets, blinking and squinting, gathered in staggered rows. For the first time, Leon saw what the others looked like. Sarah's delicate carapace shone with iridescent colors he had never imagined. The Vrogan loomed even larger than he had pictured, scales glinting with matte green and black. Others bore feathers, fur, glistening skin, or smooth metallic plates. What had been anonymous shapes in the dark now had faces, eyes, scars, and markings. He felt a strange dissonance. Part of him wanted to keep them unseen, so the memory of the festival remained pure sound and touch. But he could not unsee them now. The two sets of reality, light and dark, would have to coexist. The senior instructor stepped forward. "Cadets," she said, voice carrying across the chamber, "the blackout zone trial records for this cohort show unprecedented patterns." Leon watched a subtle glint of curiosity in her gaze that her tone did not fully hide. "Instead of the usual panic clustering, isolation behaviors, and minimal coordination," she continued, "our sensors recorded high synchronization, shared rhythms, and prolonged collaborative activity. Stress levels dropped below expected adaptation curves. Interspecies tension markers are significantly lower than prior cohorts. She paused. We would like the cadet responsible to stand. A low ripple passed through the room. Several cadets turned their new visible faces toward Leon. Sarah even nudged his elbow. He rose, throat dry. Name, the instructor said. Leon Voris, human cohort, he answered. You initiated what the logs describe as structured communal sound sequences, she said. Is that correct? Yes, he said. I wanted the valley to belong to us, not the other way around. A few cadets shifted as if the words struck a familiar chord. The instructor studied him for a moment, then inclined her head slightly. You created what the analysis team has labeled the Festival Protocol, a modular framework for using ritualized sound, motion, and shared improvised narratives to accelerate adaptation in sensory deprivation environments. Her mouth quirked in the smallest hint of appreciation. That was not in the trial brief. He swallowed. No, instructor. It just seemed necessary. Human cultures have a long history of turning hardship into ritual, she said. You chose to apply that instinct here, and you brought others with you. As a result, your unit maintained cohesion with minimal disciplinary incidents and no early extraction requests. She glanced at the rest of the cadets. You also created a case study that will be used in academy training for years. Sarah straightened with a visible flutter of pride. The Vrogan folded her arms and gave Leon a nod that, from her, might as well have been a heartfelt embrace. The festival protocol will be formalized, the instructor continued. Modified and tested under controlled conditions, of course, but its origin is yours. You will receive commendation for innovation and cross-species leadership. Her tone hardened just slightly. Do not let that go to your head. A faint laugh rippled through the room. Leon did not trust his voice enough to do anything but say, Understood. The debriefing continued with practical details and feedback. The cadets were dismissed in staggered groups. When Leon finally stepped out of the chamber into a corridor washed in ambient light, the ceiling panels felt oppressive in a new way. The brightness flattened sound, stealing some of the subtle echoes he had learned to hear. He walked beside Sarah and the Vrogan. For a while, none of them spoke. The soft hiss of doors opening, the distant murmur of other cadets, the faint thrum of power conduits in the walls. Those sounds felt louder than before, now that he knew how to listen. Do you hear it? Sarah asked suddenly. Hear what? He replied. The building, she said. It is full of tiny echoes. I never noticed. The Vrogan gave a short grunt. Once you listen, you cannot unlisten, she said. Congratulations, human. You broke vision. Leon chuckled under his breath. Good, he said. Vision needed competition. He stopped walking and closed his eyes, voluntarily plunging himself back into his own controlled version of darkness. The corridor remained. The cadets remained. The academy remained. But the festival of echoes rose behind his eyelids. Hum, click, roar, stamp, laugh. Not as memory of a desperate trick to survive, but as proof that even here, on a world that ran everything on metrics and drills, something wild and creative could bloom in the cracks. When he opened his eyes again, the lights did not feel like enemies. They were just one more stimulus among many. He turned to Sarah and the Vrogan. We should do it again, he said. Not as a trial, as a choice. Sarah's antennae lifted. A festival in the training gym? She asked. In the training gym, in the dorms, in cargo bays when no one is looking, Leon said with a grin. Anywhere. No blackout field required. Just sound. The Vrogan shook her head, but her voice held a smile. You will cause trouble, she said. The good kind. Help me cause it, he answered. Sarah clicked her mandibles in what he had learned was her version of a laugh. Festival of Echoes, she said softly, as if tasting the phrase in ordinary air. I like that. As they walked on, the three fell into step, unconsciously matching pace. Leon tapped his fingers lightly against his thigh, 1-2, 1-2-3, and heard, with quiet satisfaction, the faint reply of claws, tail, and wing case answering in time. The blackout zone had ended. The festival had not. Instructors could codify the protocol, give it an entry in the training manuals, and fit it into neat diagrams. But what had happened in the dark was more than a procedure. It was a reminder written into nervous systems and muscle memory. When the universe turns off the lights, some species panic. Humans invent holidays. Leon found that he liked belonging to that kind of species. Long after the official commendation was filed and the debriefing reports were archived, he knew that somewhere in some future trial, a new cohort would be dropped into the same valley. At first, those cadets would be afraid, stumbling in a darkness that felt like the end of everything. Then, if the protocol worked as intended, or if someone else had the same spark, sounds would begin to rise. Taps, hums, clicks, roars, laughter. The festival of echoes would begin again, in a form slightly different each time. That thought was enough. The story that had started with a human falling blindly into a lightless valley ended not with silence, but with a pattern that refused to die. A rhythm that turned fear into something shared, and darkness into just another place where life could decide, stubbornly, to celebrate itself.